James Bond.
All right, everyone out there. Hello and welcome to Shakin and Not Stirred. We are here tonight to talk about, well, why we're always here. Talk about some awesome James Bond. And tonight we are going to be talking about, in just a little while, on Her Majesty's Secret Service. But before I do, how you doing, Adam?
I'm doing very well. How are you this fine evening?
Doing good. The week is sailing along, and that's always a good sign. But it does look like it's going to be real hot this weekend, and well, I don't know about that.
I'll be heading to St. Louis this weekend for the Yankees-Cardinals game.
Oh, wow.
It's going to be really hot down there.
It does get really hot. I remember July, August, went down to see a St. Louis game, and back when Pujols was playing, and it gets hot in St. Louis. So make sure that at least you stay hydrated.
Yeah, fortunately, it's a 6:10 game, so
okay,
got to mitigate a little bit of the heat.
That is true. That is true. But before we get into our movie of the day, what have you been watching, man? What did you watch? Anything new that you'd like to share, or old?
Started watching the series Zero Day with Robert De Niro.
Oh, okay.
No, it's been out for a little while now, but I think I'm 4 episodes in.
Cool.
That's about it, right? Yeah, it's pretty good. I haven't watched an episode in probably about a week, so it hasn't really roped me into where I'm like dying to watch it every night. But that's kind of what I've been getting into. Besides various,
you've been in the theater lately in the last couple weeks.
Last time I went to the theater, what did I go see at the theater?
Didn't you see Naked Gun?
I did see Naked Gun. I think that was the last movie I saw was Naked Gun, which I was pleased with. It was as good as it could be.
Yeah,
I thought.
I went to an early matinee when it came out, and honestly, I thought about it as I sat down. I don't remember the last time I went to a new comedy at the movie theater. So, like, is it going to live up to the hype? And for what it was, I mean, is it as good as the original? No. But is it a fun time? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for what they were going for, I mean, I can't get the whole montage with the snowman out of my head for some unknown reason. Like, that's...
Well, it's funny because the first thing I saw when I first saw that, I immediately thought of the evil Jack Frost film.
Yeah.
And he ended up going that direction. I was like, oh.
Well... It's just
how about that?
Spoofs that was as a youngin', that was my comedy. So like the idea that they're all hanging out with the snowman and then he looks out the window and they're in the hot tub and he can't go in there and then it just pisses him off. It's just hilarious. But Liam Neeson, good job.
Yeah, there were some good callbacks and the casting was pretty good. I mean, like I said, we have no complaints about it. I went into it kind of expecting what I got, so I was happy with it.
Yeah. If you haven't yet, I would suggest to get to the movie theaters and see Weapons. I think you would enjoy that movie from just my perspective.
Yeah, I know Zach Kreger from Wise Kids,
Yeah.
It
was more of like, you ever see Prisoners?
No, I don't think so.
It was the guy Villeneuve, our James Bond guy. It was a couple of movies of his ago. But again, it's more of like a thriller than a horror. And, I know you're not like the biggest horror fan, but just the way it's put together, go check that out. Because, you always go see good movies. Let us, those get and dig into what we are here for this evening, which we got some breaking James Bond news. Why don't you go ahead and share it with us?
So, since the last time we were on here a couple weeks ago, they announced that Stephen Knight is going to be writing the new James Bond film. So, they still haven't decided who's going to play James Bond yet or exactly what the movie is going to be. But Stephen Knight, who is famous from writing the Peaky Blinders series, which I've always been a big fan of. I watched all the seasons of it. And he hasn't done, I don't think he's done a lot of film. He did a movie called Serenity back in 2019 that wasn't exactly that well received. He wrote that movie. Anne Hathaway, Matthew McConaughey were in it. But other than that, I mean, like Peaky Blinders is kind of is what he's known for. And if it's anything like that, and as engaging as that, I'm all in for it. So I'm pretty happy with the fact that they have him on board to do such a thing. And then next thing we got to do is figure out who's going to play James Bond. Still waiting on that.
Now, real quick, do you think, like, with the hiring of the writer, they would talk to Villeneuve beforehand, or do you think that's something that's separate and they just have to work together?
I imagine just on the timeline itself, I imagine they did speak with him.
Gotcha. Yeah,
because I don't know why they wouldn't. I mean, there's really no reason why they wouldn't. But I mean, it's possible. They didn't really. I don't think they said, either way if they did or not, or if he was on his recommendation or anything. But I guess I haven't read that myself. But I imagine that goes in the whole process. It's like putting together a team. You got to hire GM, got to hire your coach, your coordinators, and they haven't really done that before. They usually get the guy who's going to play it first, and they say, "Well, we're going to do this movie. This is what we're going to do. This is the guy we're going to have play it." Now they're kind of doing where we're going to get the writer first, the director first, and then kind of go from that point on. So they're kind of approaching it in a different way now.
Okay, so like the last film came out in 2021. At a guess, in your estimation, when year do you think this new one will come out? 2027?
If we're lucky.
Okay, so 2028.
Probably 20. Yeah, I'm thinking more 2028.
Which will put it about 7 years from the last one.
Yes, because post. I mean, it depends. I don't know how long post production would end up being on that, but I mean, I'm pretty. I would if I had to bet on it, I would say 2028.
So now let's take this into perspective and spin it to 1967. Okay, where we just last week we talked about You Only Live 2 weeks ago. Talked about You Only Live Twice. And now, in just 2 years' time, we're expecting, in a time period where we're told sometimes people weren't so forgiving or open-minded, to accept a brand new James Bond, which is kind of crazy to think about, considering how big Sean Connery and his performance was at the time, that they were going to go for that risk. I mean, I don't know if they had an option. Which you probably know a little bit more in the background before we kind of dig into this movie.
Well, as we discussed on our last episode, Connery wasn't at the point when he not recorded, but he filmed You Only Live Twice. He was not happy at all. Before it was made, during the filming, afterward, there was a lot of haggling with money going on, and Saltzman and Broccoli kind of didn't really budge on that front. So they gave in a little bit, but they still didn't really give him what he thought he deserved. And I mean, Connery, like I said, Connery kind of held all the cards with this. So going from him to a different James Bond was a risk in and of itself. And even the producers themselves weren't that confident that this was going to work. Most people weren't confident this is going to work. If you look at the budget for this film, even though You Only Live Twice still did very well, and it had, if I'm not mistaken, it still had a $9 million budget or $9.5 million budget. And this one ended up having like a $7 million budget. So they cut that down quite a bit. And you could tell with the production that they cut this one down a bit. And that's fine. But the biggest, you got to, if you're dressing the elephant in the room, who's going to play James Bond besides Sean Connery? That was a big thing with them. And they had a couple different ideas. A few future James Bonds were actually considered. Roger Moore was asked about it, but then due to, I think, some production delays or whatever it was, he signed back on to do more seasons of The Saints, so he wasn't available. And then Timothy Dalton was actually even approached to do it as well. But Timothy Dalton at that time was really young. And in fact, he just did The Line in Winter, I think, just before that. So he was, I'm not even sure, he's probably in his early mid-20s. So he turned it down just based on the fact that he thought he was too young and wasn't prepared to do something like that. And obviously, Roger Moore and Timothy Dalton would have their chances later on, but so they're kind of at a crossroads of what they're going to do. And then this guy comes along, George Lazenby, who was, I think, like a car salesman, a mechanic. He was an Australian. He was a model in Australia. He tries to audition for the part, and just during his audition, I mean, he actually lied to the guys about like his film credits, about just to get himself in. And then he kind of thought like once they caught on to it that he was being kind of screwed, but they said, "Man, you fooled those guys. You're already a great actor if you can fool those guys, like Saltzman and Broccoli." So eventually they went along with him, and he was only, I think when they filmed it, he was 28. When he came out, 29. So he was to date the youngest actor to portray James Bond.
It's interesting because I remember 2-3 years ago when we met, and you started talking about how you love James Bond. There was a lot of these Bond movies I hadn't seen before. This was one that I specifically stayed away from, and then I watched it. And to be fair, I found it to be just fun. When I watched it, I mean, is it the best one? No, but it's fun. I mean, it's not,
No, it's
fun bad. I mean, a fun bad, like
well, it gets a lot more love now than it did before when it came out. And the obvious reason was, no one liked Lazenby over Connery, and people kind of dismissed it immediately. So when it came out, it was kind of like, oh, who wants to watch this? But the story itself's not bad. It's definitely better than You Only Live Twice. So the writing has definitely stepped up a bit. But the movie itself is it shows a different side of James Bond than no one was used to. And a lot of people at that time weren't kind of prepared for that. And they didn't want that either. So it was something different. And now with the Daniel Craig ones coming out, you see a more emotional side of James Bond and a little more of a tragic side of it. It's generally more accepted. If you read reviews in this now, whether they're critical reviews or just viewers themselves, they're a lot more open to this movie now, and they give it a lot better, basically better reviews than they did before. A lot of people say this is the best one of all the older, Bond movies. It's one of the best installments. I don't think it's one of the best installments, but I certainly don't think it was as bad as they thought it was when it initially came out. I've warmed up to it a bit. It's different, and now, like I said, with Daniel Craig doing what he did, it's not such a departure from the Bond character as it initially was with Sean Connery.
No, to be fair, I mean, it made money, this movie.
Yeah, it made money.
So I guess we'll get into it after the next time why Connery comes back, because if it's successful, why didn't they do a second one with Lazenby? But sometimes
Lazenby actually, he quit the role. And right before the premiere of the film, when it came out, he already kind of quit the role.
Oh, okay.
And because he said he assumed he'd get other acting roles based off of this, and that the James Bond contract they kind of wanted to put him in was very, very demanding, and he didn't think that would allow him to do other projects. And he thought this would catapult his career, which it really didn't. But that's okay. Oddly enough, a weird thing about this is if you look at it nowadays, I read this somewhere that today, or Roger Moore and Sean Connery obviously have passed away, but when all these guys passed away up until this point, George Lazenby is actually worth more money than all of them because the way he's invested in and the way he's gone along his business since he played James Bond.
Really?
So he's done okay for himself, but he just didn't get basically he didn't get the starring roles that he thought he should.
Gotcha.
So, and then something kind of funny about that I'll mention later on, but that's why this is his only film. And it is kind of sad in a way because Diamonds Are Forever, probably the vision for Diamonds Are Forever was different when they were filming this, because Diamonds Are Forever is kind of a goofy film,
Mhm.
but it was initially going to be a little bit darker, and they're going to bring him back. Obviously, coming off of what happened at the end of this film, which I'm sure we'll get into, but it a lot of things change between this and Diamonds Are Forever. So
Well, we get to the release, which is in 1969. Okay, this movie is directed by Peter R. Hunt. Okay, besides, he was an editor and then a second unit director in the film series before this.
yeah, so
But
he did like three or four, or he did most of the Connery movies editing, and he was a second unit director, which people, so he, and people don't know, like the second unit director really directs like, doesn't really direct the main actors. They direct like more like establishing shots and things of that nature, and shots that kind of you need in between major scenes and stuff. They kind of have their own crew, their own cinematographer, their own camera, all that stuff. But it's almost, that's what I call the second unit rather than the main unit. But he did that on there. He did the editing, and you can really tell he's an editor because the editing in this one is just wild. So, but this was, besides this movie, I'm not sure what else Peter Hunt really did.
no, I just looked it up. I was gonna go to like what you were saying about Lazenby. I mean, I wonder if Hunt thought that this might get his career. He does a movie in '74 after this called Gold with Roger Moore, but not much else.
No,
Um,
he actually was going to quit. I think he was going to quit the Bond series himself, but he was approached and promised he would get a directing gig in one of these films. I don't know if it was just before this film or if it was, or exactly when that happened, but that's kind of why he stayed on. So he was very willing to do it. And he's obviously familiar with the series and has kind of his own ideas of what things should be, but he had to work with, he had to work a lower budget. So, the editing in this movie, like I said, like especially the beginning and the fight scenes, the fight scenes are just insane in this one. This is probably the most violent until the Craig movies. These are I think this is easily the most violent Bond movie there is.
let's get into some of the new characters in this one. So, who is our new Bond girl?
So the Bond girl in this one her name is Tracy, and she's played by Diana Rigg, who at this point came to fame with the Avengers series, playing Emma Peel, and they kind of wanted a very feminine but strong feminine Bond woman, because that's kind of what they have done the whole series since Pussy Galore and Goldfinger. They kind of want that stronger Bond woman, and she really is a hot mess in this film. Her character, I should say, not her. Yeah, let me make that clear. But I mean, she at the beginning, I mean, she's suicidal, but she also is very cunning, and then she is kind of closed to Bond's charms, then she's kind of open to him, and then like I said, and then obviously the rest of the film ensues, and you kind of get a different side of her. But she's involved in some action sequences, and she holds her own there. She plays very well opposite Lazenby, and she's fine as a Bond girl. She obviously has more depth than any previous Bond girl before her. Her character does, which ties into how trash this film is in the end. And Bond has been up to this point, and pretty much the whole Roger Moore and Dalton series, that James Bond's not interested in any sort of monogamy whatsoever. That's not his character. That's not the way Ian Fleming wrote him, because Ian Fleming was that way, and it's not the way that I don't think at that time it's not the way that audiences wanted to perceive him as kind of the more basically
settle down.
Yeah, the more gentle side. Basically, you can see the more emotional side of James Bond that you don't see in the Connery films. Everything's hard nosed, and he's all about, sleeping with 2 or more girls per movie, which he does in this movie too. But yeah, hey, you got to keep up appearances. But
yeah, that's true. That's true.
You do. But you see a side of him, a very vulnerable side that you didn't get before with Connery. And even in the end of this movie, like they had to reshoot the very last scene at the end of this movie because Lazenby was actually so moved emotionally that he actually started crying a little bit. And Peter Hunt had to reshoot it because he said, "Hey, we got to redo this because Bond doesn't cry." So they had to reshoot that last scene a few times. So when you see it, like he looks emotional last scene, but you don't see him crying. So like you don't get that vulnerability in James Bond, the character period, until the Craig movies again. That's kind of why I say, once you watch the Craig films, you go back to something like this, and you're a little more accepting of it. And you're more open to like this type of James Bond. He's still hard as hell, man, and he's still is a womanizer, and he goes rogue when he needs to. This is the first time of a few times where he tries to quit MI6, whatever, and resign, which turns out to be a theme in this one of the Dalton movies, the Craig movies. It happens a few times, but this is the first time you see him actually do that. So there's a lot of firsts in this movie, and like I said, like we mentioned before, it's kind of tragic in a way that like Lazenby didn't at least get to do Diamonds Are Forever and get 2 films out of them. I mean, even Dalton got 2 films. It'd been cool to see, hey, where would Lazenby stand in the Bond lexicon if he did get another film in? Would people look at him a different way? Would his career have changed? Like, what would have happened? We'll never know. So it is what it is. The film, like I said, still stands on its own. He's okay in it as Bond. I don't hate him or anything like that. Is he the worst Bond? He's probably my least favorite Bond. But
now, is he your least?
Bad.
Is he your least favorite because you just don't have as much on him? Like if you had 3 or 4 movies, you'd have a bigger judgment on him, possibly. Or you think you knew who he was by this film?
No, I think his take on the Bond character. Well, I shouldn't say his take, but how his character. The character was written. It might not have been his fault, but I just don't like. I liked the Timothy Dalton version even better. I accepted him as Bond a little more than Lazenby. If he had gotten Diamonds Are Forever, maybe that would have changed a bit.
Gotcha.
But the way he portrayed the character was almost like, in a way, it was like a caricature of itself a little bit. And he was trying to do certain things. It was almost like he was forcing himself to be a certain way so people would accept him as James Bond. But he just wasn't him. Lazenby was a very different character in real life, and I mean, he showed up to the premiere with a beard and long hair, and that pissed people off. That pissed people off immediately. They were like, James Bond doesn't look like that. It's like they couldn't separate the actor from the character. But Lazenby is a very, very liberal guy, and he was very like the late 60s, early 70s. He's very, very into that counterculture.
That's awesome.
And
in a way,
he was trying to play very straight for this film, and it worked in some aspects, but other aspects I don't think it worked very well. Physically, he was very good. The fight scenes I thought were awesome. I thought he did those very well. So, like I said, it's not bad. I don't hate him as James Bond. He's just my least favorite.
Now, what do you think? Now let's move on to, this is something that you probably could help me on. Okay, we've got Ernst Stavro Blofeld.
Yes.
Okay, we got Telly Savalas playing. How many different Blofelds are? I mean, this is our second one, right? At this point.
At this point, yeah. Because the first one, well, I mean, the other ones you don't see his face. Yeah, you see like the hand and the different voices. But Donald Pleasance, and you only have twice, is the first time you actually saw the character. So this we'll say that's number 1. This is number 2.
Why do you think they didn't bring him back, or was that just something that they just wanted to do different?
Well, Donald Pleasance couldn't do some of the physical stuff that Telly Savalas had to do in this film.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
So, in Telly Savalas, and we were talking about, the Dirty Dozen before we got on here. Telly Savalas was in movies like that. He can do some physical acting, where Donald Pleasance wasn't quite that guy. So, Donald Pleasance, you're not going to get him in a pair of skis chasing anybody or in a bobsled or doing anything. Now, granted, a lot of that stuff's like rear projection, filming, but still, he's doing some. He's not really stunts, but he's doing some of his own action scenes. So, but he has nice swagger to him, and he has a very good presence, I think. And so I think he was a good Blofeld. It's really weird though, because and people still don't understand to this day, like how did Blofeld not recognize James Bond after seeing him in You Only Live Twice? They never really explained that. It's almost like that it didn't happen, but that might have had something to do with, like, I don't imagine Secret Service was supposed to be filmed first, and then, but still, what got filmed. So now you have a continuity problem. They never really addressed it, never really corrected it. So,
did you like Telly's performance more than Donald's?
I did. I like Telly Savalas. I mean, in general, probably more than Donald Pleasance for a role, especially for a role like this. I don't take anything away from Donald Pleasance, but Donald Pleasance, the makeup and that stuff was more sinister, and You Only Live Twice. I thought Telly Savalas's demeanor in this one was more.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying it was definitely more sinister. So I like the casting of Telly Savalas. He did fine. He did one film as Blofeld, and he's probably the best Blofeld I've seen until, Christoph Waltz had a, say what you want about Spectre, he was still a cool Blofeld, but
it's pretty cool. I mean, the pretty much premise of the movie is that Blofeld's planning to hold the whole world ransom by threatening to render all the food and plants and livestock infertile through the actions of a group brainwashed angels of death.
Yeah, a bunch of women he is brainwashing at night, and Bond goes to infiltrates Blofeld's lair in Switzerland, which was basically was filmed on Mount Schildhorn, and I'm trying to think, it was a Pete's Gloria, I think it's what the place is called, and it's still there today, and they still have some almost like a Bond museum there. It's in the Swiss Alps. So those are the main locations of this movie were, basically Switzerland. And then when Bond met with Tracy's father, that was and the scenes when he's kind of, him and Tracy are he's trying to court Tracy, let's say. That's all filmed in Portugal. So they have Portugal and Switzerland. Obviously some stuff in England, but Portugal and Switzerland were the main locations for this film, especially Switzerland. So he went there to infiltrate and try to figure out what was going on with this. He was trying to find Blofeld because supposedly he's still after him, even though Blofeld doesn't recognize him, or like I said, I don't know how that's even possible, but whatever. But either way, he's posing as somebody else, and he's trying to get into and figure out what Blofeld's up to, and which he eventually does. But then he gets caught and things get kind of chaotic. But their interactions are pretty interesting, and I thought Lazenby and Savalas played pretty well off each other. And you can see right here the way, even the way they're looking at each other, those are pretty tense scenes, because sooner or later either he's gonna get caught or something's gonna come to a head. Plus the costumes. Look at the costumes of this one. They are dude. It's whoever did the costumes for this movie should have gotten an Academy Award, because even with all the stuff during the ski scenes, when he's in the car chase scene with Tracy, all the stuff, the costumes are awesome in this movie.
Yeah,
so I really think so, at least. But some of them these, there's over the top, wacky, but they play into his character. He's wearing a kilt at one point. But yeah, it's look at Bond right there, it's just, I don't know, it's just a cool outfit for the winter time. It's very practical for what he's doing. It's nothing elaborate or out of the ordinary you'd see. But yeah, the locations were cool in this, and like I said, Savalas and him played really well. There was a rumor that, and it may not be a rumor, but that Yul Brynner was considered for Blofeld, which I thought would have been. Oh, I love Yul. I thought that would have been very interesting if Yul Brynner played him. That could have been really cool.
Yul Brynner's awesome, man.
Oh yeah.
Can you imagine being in a room with Telly Savalas, you and Yul Brynner, all just sitting around in a circle? Oh man, that'd be incredible. The soundtrack to the movie here, theme song performed by Louis Armstrong. You know, I actually, before starting the research to do the show tonight, I totally forgot he did the song to this movie.
Yeah, he did. So the main theme was an instrumental, and that's the first time I've done an instrumental theme since Doctor No, really. For Much with Love kind of had an instrumental at the beginning, but then it had words in it and everything, the song itself. But they went back to an instrumental one, and I thought it was a banger, man. It was a pretty cool opening montage they did. I mean, they kind of did that as like fan fodder to kind of like, here's all the Connery stuff, so we just want you to know it's the same James Bond. It's nobody different, it's not a different character, it's just a different actor portraying him. They made references to all the previous Connery movies during that opening sequence, but the song itself is pretty awesome. And yeah, it doesn't get much better than the Louis Armstrong song as like a love theme throughout the whole movie. It really works out well, and they brought that back for No Time to Die. It's obviously years later. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the music in this movie, music, costumes, stuff like that. Definitely a big fan of in this film.
Yeah, I mean, John Barry, I mean, he really, really good job. I mean, when you could sit and do like research and just what goes into some of this composing, it's incredible.
Yeah, and John Barry has made one of the more iconic themes of all time. I mean, obviously John Williams has done things like Jaws, and I know you and Yump have talked about that as one of the most iconic themes of all time. But like, you hear the James Bond theme, you know exactly what that is as well. And I don't think he gets enough credit for something for kind of his contribution to pop culture. But so it's kind of cool that they had a good soundtrack to this. They had a good score to it, and that part definitely was not lacking in this film. All the complaints that people make about this, I never really hear that as one of them. So that's good. This was also like the first Bond movie, I think, that used slow motion and flashbacks.
Oh.
You never seen that in Bond movies before. I don't know how many times since I've seen. I mean, I guess like the Craig movies again. The Craig movies obviously broke a lot of barriers for Bond and started doing a lot of things that other, like the Roger Moore films, Connery movies, Dalton movies didn't do. But this is the first time we saw something like that happen. That was all Peter Hunt being Peter Hunt. He was kind of being creative as an editor, as a second unit director. He's kind of like, well, I'm going to shoot this way. Kind of look what I can do. And you can tell like that first fight scene on the beach. I mean, there's so many. All of his fight scenes, there's so many just quick cuts, and he changes the frame rate on you. He goes in slow motion. It's all over the place, but it works for the fights because the fights look fantastic. Like, so they're very violent, and the action's pretty good. So that I'll give Peter Hunt credit for a lot of that. But speaking of the beginning of the movie, though, the one thing I still just can't get past is Bond breaking the fourth wall. Like when he says the other fellow, this didn't happen. The other fellow is like, oh my God, dude, like seriously, like they do that whole opening montage after that, showing that it's the same character, but right before they go into the opening montage, it's kind of like the other fellow. It's like, dude, seriously, now you're just making this into like, something too comedic, and it bothered me. It bothered the hell out of me. And
well, and that could have been what, honestly, just the way you said it right there, the movies we've talked about before, even in, some of the other ones, the goofy stuff, it's still serious in a way. Doing that is, like you said, breaking that wall is like, especially considering you're also trying to take a shot probably at Sean Connery, the producers, and it's, I don't know, probably wasn't the best look.
Well, it's not a comedy. Like, comedies do that. No. Ferris Bueller did that. Like you watch Saved by the Bell. They did that. That's something you'd see in The Naked Gun. You don't see it, like, you're not supposed to see it in a serious Bond film. No. So there was no point even having that in. Like there's and no one's ever said like, I'm so glad they did that. Like no one's ever been happy they did that. So I don't know why they left it in, but it is what it is.
Again, you know, do you think when this movie's over and it comes out that the producers feel like they're at a wall again? Or I mean, where do you think they're at when this comes out and it's released and where they're going next?
They don't know where they're going next, but they're going knocking on Sean Connery's door again because they know that this series isn't going to ascend anymore. It has plateaued. It plateaued pretty much, I would say, at Thunderball, and then now it's kind of in a slow descent. But with this film, there was even a larger descent. So they were probably scared, like this might be it. If we don't get Connery back, this whole franchise is going to die, and it really may have. Casting Connery in Diamonds Are Forever may have saved that series. So, it's not far fetched to believe that because even the first two Roger Moore films weren't really well received until he did The Spy Who Loved Me. Then they kind of took off again. So it was like after Diamonds Are Forever, like you had two kind of Bond films that weren't well received. It was because Connery was gone again, probably. You want to talk about the writing being weak? You can, but it was. They were very lucky that Connery did come back and do the one film that he did, because just even that, no matter what you think of Diamonds Are Forever as a good film or just a good time, it's kind of how I look at it, as a good time. It definitely saved the franchise with just Connery coming back and doing that.
Let's get to our trivia. Do you got any trivia on this movie or anything?
So, well, one person I want to mention in here, there's no real henchman. There's a henchwoman, Irma Bunt, and she is the one who actually tragically kills Tracy at the end. The very end of the movie, she's the one that shoots the gun as they're doing that drive-by. And she was kind of a take off the Rosa Klebb character from Rush with Love, kind of that ilk. But she was played by an actress named Ilse Stepat, or Stepat, I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce it. And she died 4 days after this movie was released. And she was actually supposed to come back in Diamonds Are Forever, because she was the one that actually murdered Tracy Bond, his wife.
Okay. So
she was supposed to come back for that. But she passed away, and then they kind of just went in a different direction, which we'll talk about in a few weeks. We talked about Louis Armstrong doing We Have All the Time in the World. That was actually the last song that he recorded before he died.
Wow.
So I'm starting trivia off with a real bunch of uppers here.
Yeah.
This was Christopher Nolan's favorite Bond film. He liked this one a lot. And he said it inspired a lot of what he did in Batman Begins, which I can't quite put my finger on what that was, what he said, which makes me want to go back and look at Batman Begins and be like, okay, watch it really carefully and see if there's anything that I can pick up that he might have gotten from this film that contributed to his making of Batman Begins. One interesting thing was George Lazenby later on was considered for the role of James Bond in Never Say Never Again. And then guess who beat him out for that role? Sean Connery. So Connery ended up getting that. Lazenby didn't. Even if he did, what Never Say Never Again ended up being, even with Connery, wasn't really the best thing, So with Lazenby, it probably would have been bad news.
Even worse.
Yeah. Diana Rigg, who plays Tracy, and Telly Savalas, who's Blofeld, both were in the first two Muppet movies. No. Telly Savalas was in the Muppet movie, and Diana Rigg played Lady Holiday, which obviously is her greatest role and greatest film credit, and The Great Muppet Caper. So, and me as a staunch Muppet connoisseur, that's something like that's very important to me. And so Angela Scular, who is one of the girls she's a real curly-haired one that Bond ends up sleeping with at Pete's Gloria. And she, oddly enough, was also in the Casino Royale film that came out in 1967. And then she didn't reprise any role. It was a different role, but she came actually and filmed this movie as two completely different characters. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Gabrielle Ferzetti, who played Draco, who was Tracy's father, who's basically paying Bond to court and marry his daughter. And that's a plot thing we didn't get into. You can watch the film and see how that whole thing unfolds. This is weird. But he was only 13 years older than Diana Rigg and played her father in this film.
Interesting.
And it's kind of funny because people talk about how Sean Connery wasn't that much older than Harrison Ford in Last Crusade, but played his father. And obviously Sean Connery is James Bond, so there's that connection. But Gabrielle Ferzetti was also in my favorite Western of all time, Once Upon a Time in the West. He played Morton, the train magnate.
It was great.
That's a great film credit his part. And the last little tidbit I have is this is the longest runtime for any Bond film until Casino Royale, with the Daniel Craig Casino Royale. This came in when it was initially released at 2 hours and 22 minutes.
Very interesting.
It does, I'll give Peter Hunt this, it does flow pretty well. The pacing is good enough to where you don't feel like you're watching it for 2 hours and 22 minutes. It feels like a 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
I sometimes complain about longer movies, and when I watched it, I didn't feel like that. Like it was
no. And I'm all about longer movies if the the film calls for it. But
yeah,
this one, it didn't seem like it was 2 hours and 22 minutes. When I read that, I was like, holy shit! I'm like, they did not seem like it was that long. But when you stack it against other like Connery films and Roger Moore ones, it does seem longer when you really think about it. But you see Daniel Craig ones now, and besides Quantum of Solace, they were all over 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours 15, 2 hours 30 minutes. I think No Time to Die was the longest one. But other than that, for years, this one had the longest, from 1969 until 2006. It had it was the Bond film with the longest runtime, even though, it didn't really get well received and people didn't really like it all that much. It had a lot to it, and it had, there's a lot to discuss about it, and I'm glad people warmed up to it in recent years because it was certainly different. And a long runtime is definitely something unique in Bond films at that time because nothing even came, close to that back then.
Well, it's also just interesting, all those pieces you just shared. The only thing I got that you didn't share was as Bond passes a janitor in Draco's headquarters, the man could be heard whistling the Goldfinger theme, which is interesting. But after this, we're heading back to more Connery. He's going to be back.
And Diamond Forever is a
go on.
It's a thing, man. It is some. As I shouldn't say different Blofeld. I shouldn't say as we get we do. And that Blofeld was also in You Only Live Twice. He played a small role in that one. But this one, I think Diamonds Are Forever. This is where it goes like off the rails, man. But it's fun. It's like You Only Live Twice is my least favorite Connery film, and it's probably a better story, I guess, than Diamonds Are Diamonds Are Forever is kind of all over the place, but it's a lot more fun. You watch it, and it's like I got to sit down and watch Diamonds Are Forever, 8 million times over, watching You Only Live Twice. And one thing I want to mention is this film. The good thing about this film, Our Majesty's Secret Service, it relied a lot more on its writing and its location and its editing than the previous films because you didn't have Ken Adam doing the production design anymore. So you didn't have any, large set pieces that cost as much as other feature motion pictures or anything like that. So you had to kind of rely on writing, the actual, the dialogue itself and the interaction between the characters, the pacing and the editing, the stuff like that you might take for granted when you watch a James Bond movie because you're used to seeing such elaborate gadgets and elaborate set pieces and just over the top villains and things like that. This film didn't have that. It kind of, rests on its own laurels. So it is what it is. I enjoy it. It's a good Bond film. Like, so Lazenby is my least favorite Bond, but I mean, it's not like I can't stomach them and I won't watch the movie. I'll watch this movie over. You only live twice, any day of the week as well. So, not to keep crapping on it, we only live twice, but at least that's my opinion on it. I don't know how you feel about it, but
I like hearing your opinions because, like, to me, like, I like all these movies. Like, some of them got a little bit more of a serious tone. Some of them are more like a Roadhouse type of tone. Like, honestly, I hadn't really watched the Roger Moore ones until I talked to you. And besides seeing the cool Christopher Walken with slick back white hair, and then after watching them, I'm with you. I mean, I love Roger Moore ones, man. Those are fun, real fun.
Yeah, they're not the best films, like feature motion pictures, but they're very entertaining, and it's my favorite idea of what James Bond. It's just kind of what, and maybe I'm biased because those are the first ones I watched, but either way,
we're going to get to them. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can't wait to get to them. And we're getting very close to getting to those.
Very, very, very close. Well, thank you, my man, for joining tonight. You got anything you'd like to share? Your socials or anything where they can find you?
You can find me at my Twitter handle is on the screen here at AdamIsAbsurd34. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. You can always hit me up on there. I always post things from Sadistic Penguin on there as well. So please, if you're watching or listening, like and subscribe to the podcasts and to the channel itself. Tony's always putting some good stuff out on the musical front as well. And yeah, I'll be seeing you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, definitely. You're going to be back in a couple weeks. I think tomorrow I'm going to have a hookup on music. I know definitely next Wednesday, Mike is going to be joining me live here in our spot that we.
My guy.
Do. Yeah, and we're going to really dig into some awesome music. He always is sending me good stuff. So I'm excited to dig into that. And again, like we always say, check out his radio show on chirp.com. It's awesome. Digs into so much deep stuff, man. That's just meeting you and talking about James Bond 3 years ago, talking to Mike, talking about music. That's what's awesome, man. Just to be able to talk about all this stuff. This Friday, we're going to be having our 99th episode at the show. It's going to be a really awesome concept that Yemper came up with where we're going to put two characters from two different movies against each other. So this isn't one of them, but let's say you would say who is a better pitcher? Okay, I'll just do this one off the top of my head. Wild Thing or Tim Robbins and Bull Durham. And then you would go through each character and then come up with the conclusion of which one would be a better pitcher, if that would be one of the things. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be different. It's going to be cool. There is a lot of awesome movies I know that you will enjoy, Adam. So dig into that. And also, I'm wearing It's Getting Drafty in here. He'll be back soon. Magnificent Stan with some new shows there. And just keep tuning into the sadisticpenguinstudios.com. Like and subscribe. And also check out some of the gear that we have up. And we will see everybody soon. Everyone, have a good rest of your week. Take care. And go watch for your Majesty's Secret Service on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yes, sir.
Take care. Bye.
Bond. James Bond.